There's a statistic that haunts the idea of young love, a threat that many couples choose to ignore. Some older analyses have thrown around a scary number, suggesting the divorce rate for couples who marry between 20 and 25 could be as high as 60%. Now, while more recent data suggests that number is likely an overstatement, the core truth remains. The lifetime risk of divorce for a first marriage in the U.S. is already somewhere between 40 and 50%, and getting married young noticeably stacks the odds against you. Studies show that people who wait until after 25 to get married have a moderately lower risk of divorce. This isn't a video about fairy tale endings. It's about the uncomfortable truths a marriage license can't fix. Welcome to Nightfall Narrative. We're not here to judge, but we are here to look at the data, understand the psychology, and expose the raw reasons why saying, "I do" in your early 20s is one of the biggest gambles you can take. We're going to explore the financial chaos, the still developing brain, and the identity crises that can shatter young marriages. If you're thinking about getting married before 25, this is a conversation you can't afford to miss. Let's start with the most relentless pressure in any relationship: money. Financial problems are a leading cause of divorce for everyone, but for young couples, it's more than just a problem. It's often a crisis from day one. When you marry before 25, you're usually trying to build a life not just from scratch, but from a negative balance. Think about it. A person in their early 20s is typically just starting their career, in the lowest paying jobs they'll ever have. They haven't had a decade to build savings or establish credit. Instead, they're often carrying the opposite. Student loans are a massive burden, with the average borrower owing tens of thousands of dollars. So one partner might bring $30,000 in debt to the marriage, and the other might bring $40,000. Before you've even picked out towels, you're collectively staring down a mountain of debt. And it's not just student loans. There's immense pressure to have the right apartment, the right car, the right everything. Credit cards become a lifeline to bridge the gap between the life you want and the life you can afford. It's no surprise that some surveys, like one from TD Bank, found that a huge chunk of millennial couples, around 40%, reported arguing about money at least once a week. That's a constant, grinding source of resentment that just eats away at the partnership. These aren't just numbers. This is the fight that blows up on a Tuesday night because one person spent $200 on concert tickets while the other is stressing about the electricity bill. It's the silent tension after the credit card statement arrives, revealing purchases that were kept secret. When you're both financially insecure, every dollar your partner spends can feel like a personal attack. Their impulse buy isn't just an impulse buy, it's a threat to your shared stability. On top of all that, you're trying to hit life's most expensive milestones in the shortest amount of time with the fewest resources. You're supposed to pay for a wedding, furnish a home, and maybe save for a house, all while earning entry-level pay. The dream of homeownership feels impossibly far away when you're both working just to cover rent and loan payments. This creates a constant feeling of scarcity, and when resources are scarce, a partnership can feel more like a competition. Who works harder? Whose job is more important? Who is sacrificing more? This financial strain suffocates the joy of being a young couple. Instead of planning a dream vacation, you're scrambling to build an emergency fund. Instead of spontaneous weekends away, you're having tense budget meetings at the kitchen table. When a single unexpected car repair or medical bill can trigger a full-blown catastrophe, it's hard for love to have any room to breathe. If the financial trap is the external pressure, The internal pressure is even more complicated because it's happening inside your own head. One of the most compelling, science-backed reasons why marrying before 25 is so risky comes down to brain development. We have this idea that you become an adult at 18. You can vote, join the military, and legally bind yourself to another person for life. But neuroscience tells a very different story. The part of your brain responsible for adult decision-making, the prefrontal cortex, isn't fully mature until you're around 25. This isn't a minor detail. The prefrontal cortex is the CEO of your brain. It handles impulse control, long-term planning, emotional regulation, and rational thinking. In other words, it governs nearly every skill that is critical for a successful marriage. Until your mid-20s, you're basically navigating life with a brain that's still under construction. The emotional, reactive parts of your brain are fully active. Why? The calm, rational CEO is still an intern. This explains so much about being young, the tendency for risky behavior, the intense emotional swings, and why forever is such a hard concept to grasp. You are biologically wired for impulsivity at the exact moment you're making one of the least impulsive decisions of your life. Think about what this means for a marriage. You get into a huge fight. An immature brain defaults to a fight-or-flight response. You yell, you say things you can't take back, you storm out. A mature prefrontal cortex, on the other hand, lets you take a breath, manage your anger, and find a solution. It's the difference between a relationship-ending blowout and a constructive conversation. This also affects your ability to choose the right partner in the first place. Young love is intoxicating, but it's often driven by the reward centers of the brain, not the analytical parts. You fall in love with the feeling someone gives you, not necessarily with the complex, flawed person they really are. Your brain isn't fully equipped to vet a candidate for a lifelong partnership. There's a reason you pay a surcharge to rent a car before you're 25. Rental companies have done the math. Their data shows that drivers under 25 are a higher accident risk. They are literally betting on the statistical likelihood of you making a poor decision. Yet, we allow that same person to make a legally binding commitment for the next 50 years. You are promising forever to a person you've chosen with a brain that isn't finished developing. You are, in a very real biological sense, not the same person at 22 that you will be at 29. And neither is your partner. You are both, in effect, marrying a stranger in progress. Before we move on, if you appreciate these kinds of deep dives into difficult topics, be sure to subscribe to Nightfall Narrative. This developing brain leads right into the next big challenge, the identity crisis. Your late teens to mid-20s is the most transformative period of your adult life. It's when you're supposed to be figuring out who you are, what you believe, what you want, and where you fit in the world. You do this by experimenting. You change majors, switch jobs, move to new cities, and make and lose friends. Every experience helps you build your identity. Now, imagine trying to do all that while being legally and financially tied to another person who is going through the exact same chaotic process. It's a recipe for turbulence. The person you are at 21 is a rough draft. By 28, you might be a completely revised edition. When you marry young, you're locking yourself in with someone based on that rough draft. It's a common story you hear from people who divorced after a young marriage. We just grew apart. But it's more active than that. You don't just drift apart, you grow into the people you were always meant to become, and then you realize those two people just aren't compatible. At 22, You might both love going out all night in the city. But by 27, one of you might realize their dream is a quiet life in the country, while the other discovers a passion for a high-powered career that requires living in a major metropolis. Neither of you is wrong. You've just grown into different people. This can happen with everything: your political views, your spiritual beliefs, your career ambitions. When you're dating, these changes lead to breakups. They hurt, but they're a normal part of finding the right person. In a marriage, these same changes can feel like earthquakes. This also has a lot to do with a lack of relationship experience. For many who marry young, their spouse is their first and only serious partner. They have no frame of reference for what a healthy relationship looks like or what their own non-negotiables are. They might accept unhealthy communication or a lack of respect because they have nothing to compare it to. They mistake the intensity of first love for the stability of a true partnership, not yet knowing the difference between passion and partnership. Passion is the spark. Partnership is the slow, steady work of tending the embers, communicating through disagreements, and supporting each other's individual growth. Without that wisdom, it's like learning to swim by jumping into the deep end of the ocean. There's a specific kind of regret that often haunts the stories of those who marry and divorce young. It's the ghost of a life not lived. When you commit your life to someone at such a young age, you are, by default, closing the door on countless other possibilities. For many, the weight of those closed doors eventually becomes too much to bear. This is especially true for personal and professional goals. Your early 20s are a critical launchpad for a career. It's the time to take risks, work long hours, move for a great job, or go back to school. These are fundamentally selfish pursuits, and that's okay. They require a deep focus on your own future. But when you're married, every decision gets filtered through the relationship. Can we afford for me to take this internship? Can we handle long distance if I get into my dream school? What happens to your job if I get a promotion in another state? Suddenly, your career path isn't just your own. It's a series of compromises. Often, especially for women, those compromises can turn into sacrifices, abandoning educational goals or stepping off a career ladder to support a husband or raise children. For a while, it might feel like the right thing to do. But resentment is a slow poison. Years later, if the marriage is strained, it's easy to look back and see a field of lost opportunities. You see the degree you never got or the career you never pursued. That regret can curdle into bitterness. Beyond careers, there's the loss of personal discovery. The freedom to be young, untethered, and a little bit reckless is a rite of passage. It's backpacking through a foreign country on a whim. It's living in a chaotic apartment with 3 roommates. It's dating the wrong people to figure out what the right one looks like. Marriage, by its nature, limits that freedom. You can't just blow your tax refund on a spontaneous trip. It's a joint decision. While shared responsibility is key to a mature partnership, for a young person who hasn't had a chance to be fully independent, it can feel like a cage. You might watch your single friends living these expansive lives and feel a pang of envy. Many who marry young say they never really got the chance to know if they could make it on their own. That little bit of doubt, that ghost of the independent life you never led, can haunt a marriage until it breaks. So, is every young marriage doomed? Of course not. The statistics point to a higher risk, but risk isn't certainty. Some young marriages do thrive, becoming a testament to the power of growing together. So, what makes them work? The strongest argument for marrying young is the idea of growing together instead of growing apart. For some couples, the dramatic changes of their 20s happen in sync. They build their identities and dreams together, creating a deeply interwoven partnership. They don't have to merge two fully formed, independent lives with decades of baggage. They get to build one life from the ground up as a team. Going through all the firsts together, first real job, first apartment, first major financial challenge, can create an incredibly powerful us against the world bond. Young couples also tend to have less baggage. When you marry at 35, you and your partner likely have a history of messy breakups and cynical lessons learned. In contrast, a young couple often comes to the marriage with a cleaner slate. Their love story is their only big love story, which can give it a certain purity. Interestingly, some research suggests there might be a sweet spot for marriage that isn't as late as you'd think. The Institute for Family Studies, for instance, found that couples who married in their mid to late 20s often reported very high levels of marital satisfaction. This age may be a Goldilocks zone, old enough to have a sense of self, but young enough to be flexible and avoid the pressure of a biological clock or dating fatigue. The couples who make a young marriage work almost always share a few key traits. First is an incredible level of communication. They understand they are both works in progress and make a conscious effort to keep rediscovering each other. Second, they usually share a core set of foundational values that act as an anchor. Even as their interests change, their fundamental beliefs about life stay aligned. Finally, they often have strong support systems, family and friends who model healthy relationships and offer guidance. Marrying young can be the start of a beautiful, lifelong journey. But it's crucial to recognize that the success stories are navigating a path with a much higher degree of difficulty. Their success doesn't change the reality that for most, the odds are simply not in their favor. We've looked at the crushing weight of financial strain, the reality of an unfinished brain making lifelong decisions, and the personal crises that can cause two people to become strangers. The evidence is clear. Marrying before 25 is a high-stakes gamble. The pressures of this specific life stage create a perfect storm that most young couples aren't equipped to handle. Love is powerful, but the data tells us that love alone often isn't enough to survive that storm. A successful marriage is typically built on maturity, stability, and a fully formed sense of self, things that, for most of us, simply take time. This is not to say every young marriage is doomed, but it is to say you are choosing to play the game of love on the highest difficulty setting. Acknowledging that difficulty is the first and most critical step. Now I want to turn this over to you. The data tells one story, but personal experience tells thousands more. If you married young, whether you're still together or not, what is the one thing you wish someone had told you? What was your biggest challenge or your greatest strength? Share your story and your brutal truth in the comments below. Your wisdom could be a guide for someone else standing at that same crossroads. And for more content that explores these difficult truths, make sure you subscribe to Nightfall Narrative.